we play a game?
Why, yes, I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Getting geeky in Little Rock, it's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks so much for joining. As always, have a fun show today, and I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into it. In fact, this might be a little bit of a shorter, not much, but a little bit of a shorter show today than normal. My guest has time constraints, but given the time of year that it is, and everything he has going on, I'm just super tickled to have him. So today we're going to be talking with Jake Parker of many things, but also of Inktober. So if every Inktober, if your social media, especially Instagram, but also Twitter, I've seen it on Tumblr, I've seen it on Facebook. If you start seeing drawings, ink drawings, hashtagged with Inktober or Inktober the name, for example, last year would have been hashtag Inktober 2019. This is the man who started it all. So, Jake, welcome to Shane Plays.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, I'm so glad to have you. I was really shocked that the time of year it is that you had some time to work into your schedule. So I'm just really pleased, and if you would, we'll get to Inktober here in a second. But kind of tell us a little bit about who you are, quick bio, and then we will talk about Inktober today. But I want people to know who you are as well.
Yeah. So I am a illustrator. I'm a concept artist. I've been working professionally for over 20 years now. I spent several years in animation, in the animation industry, and I worked for Blue Sky Studios. I've done work for Disney. I've done work for a company called Real Effects in Dallas. I've worked on some video games, Warner Brothers, stuff like that. And for years I was in these art departments working on all the behind the scenes art that would go into the making of these films and these projects would go on. At the same time I was doing that, I was also doing stuff on the side, like illustrating comic books, illustrating children's books. And then back in about 2013, I transitioned into like an independent artist career where I just worked from my home and I took on freelance projects. Instead of working in a studio, I started an online school called svslearn.com with a couple other great illustrators, Will Terry, Lee White. And we teach people how to illustrate, how to do what we do. We teach them the fundamentals. We teach them like the specifics of techniques, and then the business behind illustration, having an illustration career. So in this span, I've done movies, I've done children's books, I've done comic books, I've done just about everything you could do that involves art, right? And here I am today. Also, I started a thing called Inktober back in 2009. And that was like this side project that's ended up taking over much more of my life than I expected.
Yeah. Inktober is super cool. Like I said, the majority of what we'll be talking about today is Inktober, and that's where during October, each day of October, people get a word prompt, and they're encouraged to just draw an ink, do an ink drawing, and share it with Inktober, and Inktober 2020 this year is the hashtag. And it's massive. So many people are out there doing it. And so I don't forget to mention, I've shared with you, in email, I've always been a doodler, and I've always drawn little stick figure comics and stuff like that. But I've never considered myself an artist by any means. But I've always been, just frankly envious of people who can draw well. I've always been like, I wish I could do that. And there's a lot of people out there that, you can have talent, but you got to refine it. You got to practice it, and there's people out there that are just amazing. But even I keep all my drawings. I think I've done Inktober for 3 years. I think this will be my 4th year. And even with my little doodle type artwork, I can see an improvement over the years, and I can see being riskier in the complexity of stuff that I would want to draw. And there's something about saying, I'm going to do these 30 or October 31 drawings on a daily. It improves you. There's just something about it. And plus, when you take that prompt, you're drawing something you may not normally draw anyway. Now, if I remember right, the rules of Inktober, you don't have to follow the prompt, but you're encouraged to, right?
Correct.
The quote unquote rules. It's very benevolent in its rules. So I just, I want people to encourage people, if you're, no matter what level of art you think you're at, it's a fun exercise to do. It really is, because almost everybody doodles. Like if you're on the phone or, you're in school or whatever, and part of your brain was bored, you just sit there and doodle. So, but having said all that, we will get back to Inktober. I want to touch a little bit more on your career here. First of all, you mentioned SVS Learn, folks. That's the Society of Visual Storytelling, SV as in Victor, learn.com. And that'll be in the show notes when this episode goes out. People can go to shaneplays.com. And there'll be links to Jake's website, mrjakeparker.com. There'll be a link to Inktober. There'll be a link to SVS Learn. So, you can, if you're like, what the heck are they talking about? Just go to shaneplays.com and there'll be show notes there. So, I didn't even know until I started researching for the show your background in illustration and freelance illustration and professional illustration. And you mentioned a couple of things, movies, video games, and comic books. Those are three big topics that come up a lot on this show. It's general geek talk. So I want to spend a couple of minutes there. Now, you worked on what I believe is one of the most beautifully animated movies out there, and that was Titan AE. So what the level of animation on that, I still don't think that movie gets the credit it deserves. Just spectacular animation, especially that scene at the end when they're in the kind of ice crystals and all that. There's just so much, and that gas planet they were on with the little manta ray things or whatever. Just the animation is mind boggling. So what you did concept art, or what did you do with Titan AE?
So that was like my first professional job, and I was actually hired on as a rough in-betweener. And this was back when animated films were primarily done by hand on paper.
Right.
And so my job was, I was essentially an assistant to an assistant of an animator. So I wasn't even an animator's assistant. I was assistant to an assistant of an animator.
Right.
So the animator, they would go in and they would, in animation, it's, sometimes it's 24 drawings per second. Right. And so the animator, they're super talented. They've got a lot of animation to do. So what they'll do is the key poses. So they'll draw the character, since if someone throwing a punch, they'll draw the character pulling back, and then they'll draw the punch connecting, hand it to their assistant, and then they'll draw a few drawings in between, and then they'll hand it to the in-betweener, and we'll do the rest of the drawings that go in between those drawings. And so that's what I was doing there. What was cool about that job, this was me, like, I dropped out of school to take this job. So I was like kind of putting everything on the line.
Right.
And I treated that job as like the next semester of my school. So
which was smart.
So I made sure I met everybody that worked at that studio, spent a little time with them. And I would kind of take on my breaks, go around, visit the background painters, visit the animators, visit the concept artists, and just show them what I was working on in my personal work, get feedback from it, learn from them, and try to apply it to the next drawing that I was doing. And so I count that as like my schooling, part of my schooling as well.
Yeah, you probably learned stuff there working with, I'm not knocking school. You learn stuff in school, but getting out there and rolling up your sleeves and getting into it. Like, I've done a lot of my career in web programming and programming. And school's great and everything for principles, but there's nothing like getting out there and being in the middle of it. So, and I was also very smart, even in this digital age, networking and relationships is so important in a lot of industries. I would assume illustration is one of them. And that was very smart just to make sure you met everybody. So, and built relationships. So I have to ask you, I have nothing but immense respect for Don Bluth. Did you get to interact directly with him much, or was it like very sort of, 5 steps removed?
You would see him in meetings. He would come to meetings, from time to time. There would be, I wasn't directly involved with him. He was directing the film, him and Goldman. what's the? I just dropped his
Yeah, it was
name
Goldman.
out of my head.
Yeah.
Ron Goldman or regardless,
Gary Goldman.
Gary Goldman. That's right. Dang it. Okay, it's been so many years. Gary Goldman. So those two, they would spend a lot of time with the storyboard artists. They would spend a lot of time with the animators. So I didn't interface much with them, but early on when I first started, I was like, I want to go meet him. So I went up to his office, knocked on the door. I had one of the production assistants with me, and they're kind of like, yeah, I'll introduce you to him. So I went in, he invited me in, and I'm new here. I'm a huge fan of your work. I loved Secret of Nim. I loved All Dogs Go to Heaven, whatever. The usual things you say.
Sure.
And he was sipping on this green concoction, like green grass or something, some drink. And, he's just nodding and he's listening. And I said, I'm young. I'm new to this profession. I was wondering if you have any advice. And he kind of, swishes the drink a little bit and kind of thinks a minute. And then he says, if you're a real good boy and you work really hard, or no, he says, if you work really hard and you're very good, someday you'll be a real boy. And I was like, thank you.
That's well, I mean, there's practical advice there, but it also shows the whimsy of the field that you're in, I know you didn't do this, but I would have loved it if you gave him like the finger guns and said, the Jake has a power when it's there.
Hindsight is 20/20, right?
Yeah. What are you
if you could?
Yeah.
I just kind of nodded and thanked them and went on.
Yeah. That's great. I don't want to spend too much time there, but, you got Titan AE, which again was a beautifully animated movie. There's all kinds of different kinds of animation, and I like them all on their own certain level, but hand-drawn frame by frame animation has an element to it that I just love, that, no other no other animation could touch. So you've also worked, with, you said you were at Blue Sky Studios where, you, were involved with films like Horton Hears a Who, which my son has watched many times, Rio and Epic, which is super cool. And I'm blowing through that. I mean, I could do about 3 or 4 podcasts with you just going through this stuff. You've done a lot of children's books, illustration on children's books, but what was your work in comic books? I see Rocket Raccoon here, but what else have you done in comic books?
So I did Rocket Raccoon. I did a 5-issue stint with Scotty Young as writer. That was really cool. It was, a highlight of my career, I would say. It was so fun working with Scotty and just kind of like he would call me up and be like, "What do you want to draw this issue?"
Right.
Tell him, I want to draw this. He's like, "Okay, I'll fold it into a story," and that was really cool. I did 2 graphic novels called Missile Mouse, and I did those prior to doing Rocket Raccoon. I actually did Missile Mouse. I created Missile Mouse in junior high, and I would draw him in like my notebooks and my sketchbooks and stuff. And it wasn't until I was like, well into my career that I drew for fun, just out of the blue, drew like a modern, like a contemporary Missile Mouse story.
Right.
How would I approach this character I created as a teenager? How would I approach it today? And it ended up getting published in an anthology, and Scholastic saw that and said, "Hey, we'd like to do, would you be interested in doing a graphic novel series with this character?" I said, heck yeah, sure. And so I ended up doing 2 graphic novels with Missile Mouse. So I have this thing about furry animals and projectile.
Rockets and
rockets.
Yeah, you're like, look, Missile Mouse was years ago. But it just happens that there's also Rocket Raccoon. Speaking of comic books and Rocket Raccoon, I've been a Rocket Raccoon fan since the 80s. There was, and the reason I'm bringing this up, because I see and I got to take Wikipedia with a grain of salt, so correct me if I'm wrong, but some of your influences are Bill Watterson, of course, Calvin and Hobbes, Jim Lee, and Mike Mignola. And there was a 4-issue limited series of Rocket Raccoon in the 80s that Mignola did the art for, which was amazing. And this was way before the modern, Rocket Raccoon. So were you influenced at all by that Mignola Rocket Raccoon limited series from the 80s?
I have never seen it. I hadn't seen it, and I still haven't read that series. Okay. I've seen the book covers or the art is fantastic.
It's amazing, and that's before I even Mignola is one of the artists I can immediately identify as soon as I see, and I think that was my first exposure to Mignola, and all I can remember is I love this artwork, and then years later I was like, oh, that was that's Mike Mignola. I guess it's Mignola. Is it Mignola? I always said Mignola.
I pronounce it Mignola.
Mignola. So, Mr. Mignola. Yeah. Okay.
Like a filet mignola.
A filet mignola. I always say Mignola. So it's funny, when you're growing up and you're reading authors or seeing it, you form in your mind how it's said. And then over the years, you realize how off you were. So anyway, we'll say Mignola.
Yeah. I would say the difference between Miss Mouse and Rocket Raccoon, Miss Mouse, It was funny to watch Guardians of the Galaxy, and that was really my first exposure to the movie. Was my first exposure to them. I heard of them. I kind of read about them a little bit. I never read the issues, so it was interesting to see that. Missile Mouse. It's if you took Ethan Hunt from Mission Impossible, and you put him in a mouse's body, and then you stuck him in a Star Wars type of universe. That's what Missile Mouse is. That's
Missile Mouse is. Well, it's got a great. I mean, I like the name. I like that good, strong, punchy alliteration, Missile Mouse. Yeah. So it sounds fun. Mm-hmm. And then, you've done some comic book work. You've done some film work. You've got all these children's books here. I don't want to completely gloss them over before we move into Inktober. Is there any particular children's book you want to give a shout out to, or before we move on?
I would do two. Little Bot Sparrow was the book that I wrote. The rest I illustrated. Other authors wrote. Little Bot Sparrow is a book I wrote and illustrated, and it's actually based on a short comic story that I had done. I'd done the short comic for a anthology series called Flight, and that story was always so well received by people. And then I pitched it as a children's book, and ended up getting a book deal to do that. And it was. It was just a great experience, and I love that story. And it's a story about an unlikely friendship, about kind of overcoming perceptions, what you think about another person, just from kind of seeing through their skin and seeing what their heart is. And so I love that book. I'm always excited when people have tell me they've read it and they have it. The other book is Awesome Man, The Astonishing Secret of Awesome Man. That was written by Michael Chabon, or Chabon. That's another one of those names. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning author for the Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. I messed up the name of that book too. But he's this novelist, and he wanted to do a children's book. So he wrote a children's book, and I had the opportunity to illustrate it for him. And it's about this kid who his imaginary alter ego is Awesome Man. And what's great about that one too is it's just fun. It's just a fun book. But what's cool is 10 years later, he's like, hey, I've got an idea for a second one. Would you want to illustrate it? It's like, if you got a great idea, I'll illustrate anything, Nice. And so this October, the follow-up book to that one comes out as well. So okay,
and you were basically right on. It's the Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. So
there we go.
You said the Adventures of Cavalier. I mean, that's you basically did. And it's Cavalier with a K if people are looking for it. So well, that is super cool. I mean, you got a wide range of work you're doing, and that was another point I wanted to bring out. In case there's any younger folks or whatever that are either new to the profession of illustration or are wanting to get in. Mm-hmm. It's rare to meet somebody that's all they do is just one thing, right? Mm-hmm. It's usually a smattering of things you do to support yourself. So as much as we love this kind of stuff, it's rare to meet somebody who says, well, I just draw one piece of artwork a week and I'm done. That's just, that's usually not, so it's usually, a lot of hard work, but it's fulfilling. if you have a craft that's in you and you kind of sharpen that craft and work it and all that. So, all right, let's talk about Inktober.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me do this real quick as we transition into Inktober. I got to do my show notes real quick. So, folks, don't forget that for every episode of Shane Plays Geek Talk, if you go to shaneplays.com, the show notes are up there. So you can get all the links and everything for what Jake and I are talking about. Last week's show is there, of course, and that was episode 228, which was the Good Strong Hands RPG with Craig Campbell of Nerd Burger Games. Go check that out. You'll also learn about the Butterburger, which is from Wisconsin, obviously. So check that out. The show does go out, as a podcast in multiple places on the blog at shaneplays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Podbean, YouTube. I put it up on YouTube, just the audio. Some people like to listen to that way. And now Amazon Music now has podcasts. So you can find us on Amazon Music. And that shook things up so much when it came out that like Spotify's stock dropped like 1.5%. I don't know how this stuff works. Just go listen to podcasts and have fun. Let the business world be itself, I guess. Shane Plays is also carried on Krypton Radio. Krypton Radio is sci-fi for your Wi-Fi, kryptonradio.com. Shane Plays does have a Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Shane Plays and support for as little as $1 an episode. And I want to mention that Jay Parker has a Patreon too. Maybe he'll want to tell us a little bit about that when I come back from the show notes. And you can follow the Twitter. Follow me at Shane Plays. That's ShanePlays. That's the Twitter where I just constantly flap my mouth. And then I also have a less busy Twitter for those that just want the meat and potatoes. And that's at Shane Plays PR. So ShanePlays PR. And both Twitters, I often share links from like Humble Bundle and other places where you can save money. And it puts a little bit of money in my pocket too. So it never bothers me if you want to do that. And last but never least, I want to give a shout out to Cursova Magazine. CIRSOVA Magazine is doing yeoman's work in keeping the pulp era alive. If you like Edgar Rice Burroughs, if you like Robert E. Howard, if you like H.P. Lovecraft, if you like that pulp era of short fiction, sword and sorcery, science fiction, all that stuff, check out Cursova Magazine, CIRSOVA Magazine. And now back to Jake Parker as we talk about Inktober. So did you want to throw a quick shout out for your Patreon? Completely up to you.
Yeah, sure. Patreon.com/Jake Parker. And it's mostly behind the scenes and some tutorials and things like that. It's, if you're interested in, learning more about the craft of illustration and how I go about doing it and seeing the behind the scenes, then I think that's for you.
Yeah. So, okay, cool. And another thing, I just got to mention this real quick. I'm on your about page of MrJakeParker.com. Some of your clients are Dungeons & Dragons, Bad Robot, who's J.J. Abrams, Blue Sky, Google, Marvel, Disney Animation. Yeah, you've Warner Brothers, etc. You've worked for a lot of cool stuff. So, okay, let's talk about Inktober. I've already mentioned what Inktober is. You've also got Inktober 52, and I'm participating in that one as well, where people can do a drawing a week, and those prompts come out on Thursday. You sign up for go to Inktober.com. It's super easy. You just sign up for a mailing list. You don't even have to be on the mailing list, and you get a little prompt list that tells you, on what day or which week to draw what, and then share it. And it's just a fun exercise. So why you started Inktober in 2009? How did that happen? What was the thing there? Why did you start Inktober?
Yeah. So I was inking with these technical pens, the Microns, right? And they were fine, and I enjoyed them. A friend of mine at work brought this Japanese brush pen. He had recently got in Japan or Little Tokyo or something. I don't know where he ended up with this brush pen. But he hands it to me. He's all, check this out. And I started messing with it and playing with it. And I immediately saw like the power of this brush pen, like to create really fluid strokes, really interesting marks that I couldn't get with the technical pens, right? Or the drafting pens. So I went and got my own pen and I started playing with it. And I thought, I need to get better at this. I need practice, and I need like some sort of structure and framework to motivate me to practice. And I'm always looking for things to, an angle to promote my work as well, right? To get it out there. And so my friends were all doing PX90, and they were doing these health challenges, like a 30-day cleanse. Yep. And so I just kind of put the two together. I'm like, well, let's do an art challenge. Let's make it about ink. October's coming up. Let's call it Inktober. And let's just do an ink drawing every day. It'll be like this framework that I can use to get better at drawing, get better with my pen, have something that I can post consistently online so that I can get more exposure for my work. And I did it for the first year, and it was great. Like this was in the era of blogs. Nobody was really posting artwork on Twitter. There was no such thing as Instagram, right?
Right.
Facebook was still just updates from relatives, and
oh, it's so much better now.
Yeah,
all that lovely political discussion, and we'll move right on.
Right. So blogs was where the artist community was, like blogs and forums and message boards is where the artist community was like sharing and talking about and commenting on artwork. And I got a lot of traction from Inktober. And so I just ended up doing it every year after that. And as social media became the platform that artists wanted to share their work on, I transitioned to that, and as hashtags became a thing, I started using the Inktober hashtag, and it's just since like grown year after year into like this worldwide participation.
Right. So and that's a lot of people are down. I'm not down on social media. It's a tool. It's technology, like anything else. It can be used in a pleasant way, in an unpleasant way, in a neutral way, whatever. But I mean, this is an example of where social media kicks butt, right? Because Inktober probably, well, I would say not probably, wouldn't have grown like it had without social media, right? I mean, it's correct. Just, you hashtag it and off it goes. So about what year did you go, whoa, this is starting to be something?
Yeah, it was probably 6 years into it where I was like, oh, this is becoming a thing that like transcends me as like it became to the point where people were like, yeah, I was telling someone about Inktober, a friend of mine, and they're like, they had never heard of you before. So it became just kind of word of mouth spread the idea of Inktober around to the point where, it was just this thing that like many people just kind of thought came from the ether, right? Like there was no person behind it or no inertia behind it. And so it was 2015. And one thing I started seeing too was more and more like organized participation where people are, starting to make their own prompt lists and things like that.
Oh, so, interesting. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in 2016 is when I was like, well, I'll get in on this. And I made it like an official Inktober prompt list that everybody who wanted to could follow along and do it. And then this last year for 2020, I came up with Inktober 52, which was a way for people to do one drawing every week throughout the year. So 52 drawings, 52 weeks. And it was just a way to stay fresh because, Inktober would roll around in October and maybe you hadn't drawn anything since last Inktober, really. This was a way to like keep you, in shape, in drawing shape, so that when Inktober came, you'd be better prepared for it.
Yeah, I've been doing both. Like I said, they're just fun. I just enjoy doing it. And, I can get really busy and feel like I'm not getting much done in life or at work or whatever. Knocking out an Inktober drawing gives me a sense of, I'm like, I feel good. I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. It just feels good, Do you have any idea? And I know it's probably almost impossible to truly quantify because there's probably a lot of people that participate that never even post their stuff. Mm-hmm. Do you have a loose approximation of how many people like participated last year?
I want to say, there was something like 4 million Inktober posts on Instagram last year.
I had no idea it was that big. That is big.
Yeah. So, but most people post drawings like the first week and then they kind of peter out, right?
Oh, is that what happens? Okay.
Yeah. It's
like
hard to
people
do,
going
right?
back to the gym at New Year's, right?
Exactly. So you get in, you'll do it for a week, and then all of a sudden, an assignment's due, and that takes precedent. You didn't do that in Inktober, and then you kind of lose your inertia there. So I want to say, it's a couple 100,000 people at least who do
That's
it.
fantastic.
All through October.
All right, and I know your time's drawing short, but I got to ask you: You've been doing it this many years. I can only imagine that you've gotten some stories where people have said, this affected my life positively this way.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure even mentally people were like, I was laid up in the hospital and I did Inktober and I gave, I'm just spitballing here. But do you have a story or stories that have really stuck with you?
I can't say anything specific because I've heard so many of them, but they generally fall into 2 or 3 versions. And one of them is, I'm a professional creator. I used to draw all the time for myself, and I kind of stopped doing that. And I just kind of showed up to work, did my job, and then I would go home and not draw for myself anymore. And Inktober gave me an excuse to actually draw something for myself, and it led me to, to create this certain thing that I created. Whether it's a book, it led to a book, or it led to just a more fulfillment in what they're doing. So that's one of them. The other one is, Inktober, like you said, Inktober. Doing the act of drawing every day, number one, like I got better at drawing, but number two, like I found, I sort of found a purpose. Not that there's no purpose in life without Inktober, but it gave them something to do, like for that month that they could really be proud about and really like latch onto. And these people say that, I feel like I'm creative again. I feel like I found a way to express myself that I didn't know I could before. And so I always love that. And then there's other people who, just the act of drawing and posting something every day, they said, I have gotten so many new followers on my Instagram account. People found my work because I was just posting so consistently. And so I just want to thank you for, creating a thing that would help me want to do something like that. So
that's fantastic. I mean, it must feel good to have, because I mean, I'm sure when you first started doing it, you had no idea that,
no
in
idea.
2020, here we'd be with, it's this huge thing. So it must feel good, to know that something that you started to help yourself is also helping other people. And like I said, I've always liked to doodle, always liked to draw. It's fun. And eventually, one of these days, I'm going to do a web comic. I used to do little comic books when I was a kid. And I'm like Gary Larson is like, I can't draw, but I can cartoon, right? Yeah. So from the Far Side. So that'll be my kind of approach. But this has helped me get more confident to prepare for that.
Well, I was impressed with your drawings that you sent me.
Oh, were you? Well, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, it was cool to see that
progression.
Right.
Yeah. It's really, because it literally went from stick figures to drawings, and so I, the other day, because I've got like 3 or 4 years collected in a Google Photos thing, which is what I sent you. I just said, I just want to show you what you've done for me, what Inktober's done for me. And I'm like, wow, I'm seeing a progression here. Like, a real progression. So if anybody, and if people have no desire to be a professional illustrator, it exercises a part of your brain that's really fun. So I would, or if you've ever thought, can I draw? Should I draw? Give it a shot.
It's the same thing. Like there's, we have a piano in our house. My kids play piano. I've never had lessons, but I try to learn a song every now and then. And that shift, my brain just going into that mode of music, it's like the perfect relief to being on this other side of drawing all the time. And so I kind of feel like if your brain's always doing one thing, give it a chance to do something else.
Exactly.
And it'll help. That
is a great way to put it. All right. I'm going to wrap you up. I know you got to go. I just wanted to encourage folks. This movement, this, whatever you call it, Inktober, it's very positive and encouraging. I have never seen one negative comment on a post that was shared with an Inktober hashtag. I've never seen anybody say, well, that was terrible. And I mean, there's people out there posting beautiful stuff all the way down to stick figures that, are shaky, right? Mm-hmm. So, because everyone's a different level. Mm-hmm. And it's just people, man, I'll have people like my stuff and I'll go look at their stuff and I'm like, they're amazing. What are they liking my stuff? And it's just everybody encouraging each other, so it just feels good to participate. So, all right, Jake, I'm gonna let you go. Folks, remember,
thank you.
Go to inktober.com. And Jake, I've got to, I want to thank you your time, but there's a tradition on Shane Plays. I have the bad joke of the week. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. What do you call a cow that plays guitar?
I have no idea.
A musician.
Okay.
All right, man.
Perfect.
Have fun. Have fun with Inktober this year. Folks, go to inktober.com. If you remember anything else, just go there. It's everything you need to know. Jake, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for Inktober, and I wish you nothing but success in your future endeavors.
Thank you so much. It's good to meet you, and I appreciate the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, same back to you. I've really enjoyed it. And folks, we'll catch you next time on Shane Plays Geek Talk. Thanks so much for listening.
I live for the simple things, like how much this is gonna hurt.
Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.